We are now in the final straight, and the next presenter, we felt in 2012, AIMS awarded Comrades an award at the AIMS Gala in Athens, a special recognition award as the oldest marathon in Africa. And the presenter today is a passionate Comrades runner, but is also a passionate historian. And we felt it would be a great opportunity to share his passion and how he depicts the history of Comrades, to give the delegates a real feel of how the Comrades Marathon, this iconic South African event, originated and what inspired the founder of Comrades to start this race in South Africa. It is a really presentation that captures the imagination. So we will ask after Mr. WP van Zyl, who is a dentist by profession, but I think he would prefer to be called a Comrades runner. But before I call him, he also jumped into the spotlight a few years back when he was one of the first Comrades runners that pioneered a new event that is linked to the Comrades Marathon, and it's called the Unugwaja Challenge. But you can ask him more about that at the functions or during the course of the week, where him and a few mates, during the week, as we are sitting here, there's another group who took off from Cape Town on Thursday last week, cycling to Pietermaritzburg. They will arrive here on Saturday afternoon, and on Sunday morning, they will run the Comrades Marathon. And it's in commemoration of a famous Comrades runner called Phil Masterson Smith. But let me not try to steal the thunder of WP van Zyl and call him to the podium to do his presentation.
Thank you very much, Gary and Cheryl, for inviting me here this afternoon. I can tell you, coming up from Cape Town this morning, there is the fever around Comrades Marathon is starting to become alive. As you see runners arriving in Comrades Marathon shirts, others arrive in the tracksuits of their local running club, and it's old friends getting together for this annual pilgrimage towards KwaZulu-Natal to come run the marathon. And I must say, for me, standing here, being surrounded by runners and people who are interested in running is very comfortable. So I'm very comfortable as I stand in front of you. So friends, may I ask you to engage your imagination for this next session, and particularly your senses of sound, smell, and sight as we travel through this next section. Come with me to a far-off place. This place is not only far off, in fact, it's back in Europe, but it's also back in time, around about or in the middle of the First World War. Ladies and gentlemen, come with me to this place. A landscape where there is nothing. No birds, no trees, only debris, destruction, and the smell of death in the air. In this landscape, our home is a hole in the ground where we live hand in hand with disease and the ever-present fear of death hanging over our heads. Fortunately, we are surrounded by friends or comrades who help us to survive this terrible ordeal. They give us hope, inspiration, and a sense of purpose, living for the person next to us. Every now and then a whistle sounds, and together we all jump out of our hole and charge forward towards some invisible enemy that we are supposed to seek and destroy, only to return a few minutes later with fewer friends, fewer family members. And it is in circumstances similar to these that the hero of our story, Vic Clapham, finds himself. Despite the hardship, the death, the destruction, Vic Clapham sees a ray of hope. And in his mind, he conceives a race that must be long enough so that the participants must suffer across it. Suffer in remembrance of those brave souls that didn't come home. Suffer for a day in remembrance of those brave souls who gave their todays so that we could have a tomorrow. But of course, Vic Clapham wasn't unfamiliar to scenes like these. He served among black and Indian men in the Craddock Town Guard as a 13-year-old boy during the Anglo-Boer War. You can see him lying across the bottom there. To get a clearer image of this picture, please visit the Comrades Marathon Museum in Pietermaritzburg, where there's a clear picture of this. But being in the ambulance corps, Vic would have been exposed to scenes like these. A mass grave of fallen heroes after the Battle of Spioenkop. His senses would have been exposed to the sight of dead corpses, to the sound of grown men crying as they pass from the present to the hereafter, to the smell of death. Despite these, the effect that these traumatic images, these violent experiences must have had on his young mind, he gets a plan to have a race from his hometown in Pietermaritzburg all the way down to Durban and the sea. He takes his idea to the League of Comrades of the Great War, but they disregard it. A year later, he takes his idea again, and they disregard it again. A third year, he takes his idea, and reluctantly, they agree on the condition that he must pay back the £1 they are willing to lend him to help him organize the race. So on the 24th of May, 1921, 34 brave souls line up for the first Comrades Marathon outside the Pietermaritzburg City Hall, the largest brick building in the Southern Hemisphere. Come Sunday, runners will be lining up at that exact same spot 93 years later. Ladies and gentlemen, we see that out of death, destruction, and dissolution arises something that's lasting, loving, and laudable. There arises the largest ultramarathon in the world. Let's go back to Europe again. And we travel to another battlefield. This time, it's the Persians fighting the Greeks at the Battle of Marathon. Again, we are surrounded by scenes of terror, blood-wrenching sounds, and death all around us. In the end, the Greeks get the upper hand, and they call a soldier who's taking part in all of this destruction to send the message to Athens. This soldier is a runner, so he makes a perfect messenger. Pheidippides runs the roundabout 40 kilometers from Marathon to Athens. And after delivering his message, "Rejoice, we are victorious," he collapses and dies. Again, death, destruction, sadness, and evil. Yet out of all this darkness comes the inspiration for what has become the modern day marathon. Out of this scene, this battlefield scene of violence, arises the inspiration for the culmination of the modern day Olympic Games, the modern day marathon. The first one being seen here, where Spyridon Louis wins the very first Olympic Games marathon in 1896. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take you to one more battlefield. This time we're back in South Africa. It's the Battle of Paardenburg. Again, it's the Anglo-Boer War of 1899 to 1902, and Spioenkop is passed. The reaction of Spioenkop was that lots of British soldiers gathered in Cape Town, and they start pushing northwards. They outflank the Boers, and at a fork in a river, just below a hill called Paardenburg, they corner them. The Boers forms their traditional circular laager to defend themselves. Besides themselves, they've got their family members, their possessions, and their servants with them in the laager. The British are now bombarding this laager, and the Boers are fighting back. Once again, death, destruction, stench, sorrow, sadness. In the end, after significant loss of life from both sides, the Boer general, Piet Cronje, surrenders. To the carnage is added 4,000 Boer prisoners of war. They are moved down to Cape Town and transported to faraway British colonies, some as far as Ceylon or Sri Lanka as we know it today. The servants of the Boers that were captured are also sent away to foreign countries. The sorrow, the hatred, the sadness just escalates. Here we see some of the foreigners serving in a foreign country. The fourth one from the left is Len Tau, one of General Cronje's personal servants. On the 31st of May 1902, peace is declared. That's almost 112 years ago to the day. These friends or comrades come together again. And in 1904, they are invited to America to attend what is known as the World's Fair. This is a massive exhibition of cultural events or anything that is magnificent or awesome. British and Boer soldiers are asked to recreate and act out some of the battles, including the Battle of Paardenburg. General Piet Cronje plays himself, and he invites some of his loyal servants with him. Now, at the same time, in St. Louis, the third modern-day Olympic Games were being held. The events were organized a bit haphazardly and occurred between the attractions of the World's Fair. When it came to the marathon event, the organizers approached Len Tau and Jan Massiani, two of General Cronje's followers, and they took part in the marathon. They came 19th and 13th overall, but they could have done better, since they were being chased by a ferocious dog and had to make a detour of several minutes. Despite that, they became the first South Africans to run a modern-day marathon. Out of destruction, despair, dissolution, the Battle of Paardenburg, arose the first modern-day Olympic game athletes from Africa. Dear delegates, perhaps some of you, as you are sitting here, are fighting your own battles. Perhaps it's a personal concern. Perhaps it's a political issue or an organizational frustration. Perhaps your challenge seems dark to you, deathly or destructive. Please remember, in 1918, a soldier called Vic Clapham had a dream. That dream was to show that using running as a medium, that the human spirit can overcome adversity. Allow me one more example. In 1981, a white man ran Comrades with a black armband. It was his 5th running of the Comrades. Remember, that time, apartheid was at its highest. In fact, on this very day, Comrades coincided with the 20-year celebrations of the apartheid republic. He wanted to highlight the plight, the adversity faced by black and colored people living in South Africa who didn't have any rights in their own country. He was insulted along the 90-kilometer route. Rotten tomatoes were thrown at him. And despite all that destruction, he went on to win the race. He kept up his friendship and comradeship with fellow black colleagues. And he went on to win the Comrades Marathon an unprecedented 9 times. And in his time, he had the privilege and the pleasure of receiving recognition from a liberation hero. A man who during that very first victory was still confounded to a prison cell on an island, and who could give this reward to him as a free man. Ladies and gentlemen, we as the public, as the people outside of this conference, needs your leadership, your guidance, and your organizational skills to keep us running. Please keep on fostering and promoting distance running. The world needs running to keep giving us hope, to keep us celebrating, to carry us through adversity, to help us celebrate pushing our own boundaries. The world needs running to help us celebrate the camaraderie of our companionship. Thank you very much.